All right, so it's Todd Atkins, and I'm back with Miguel and we're back to another MMA Conspiracy Hour, and I think we got a good kind of angle for today. And this is coming off the news of Francis Ngannou being announced to fight Anthony Joshua in March in Riyadh. And before we start, as always, I want to thank our sponsors, Live to Fight Design and Bet Stamp. You can find Live to Fight Design on Instagram at Live to Fight Design. They make fight banners and gym banners. And Bet Stamp is our gambling sponsor. And I'll include some information here later in the episode about where you can find my website, which is signupexpert.com/TAS is the website, but I'll tell you more about it later on the episode. Now, Miguel, I kind of want to get your opening thoughts and for people, as I mentioned, our angle with this announcement, it seems like Ngannou may be getting further and further away from ever fighting in the PFL. So me and Miguel were kind of thinking we could call this episode like, will Francis Ngannou ever fight in the PFL? So Miguel, I kind of want to give you your opening thoughts on the match being announced and also that.
Yeah, we've got Francis Ngannou now taking on Anthony Joshua in March timeframe. They haven't announced the exact date yet, but they've gone so far as to put the match out there and put the time frame out there. And they said it's pretty much a done deal. So it looks like we're going to see Ngannou have his second professional boxing match at a pretty high level and at a pretty high level of pay. In March of next year, which really does put a damper on what the PFL, the expectations of, seeing him do MMA again, it looks further and further away. What is, again, the PFL's direction seems to be confused. They seem to send weird and mixed messages or no messages at all. Again, here's an announcement with the guy they signed. The signing was viewed in some corners, and they certainly felt this puts us in the ball game with the UFC. This puts us in competition with the UFC. And, the follow-up to that, which is everything, has been nothing but ball drops. If he boxes again, we'll see. If Don Davis is at every press conference being a strong personality, or Ray Sefo or somebody like that, being a strong personality like Dana was around the Floyd Connor stuff, and making sure that the PFL logo and the company and everything is never forgotten. Anytime that Francis Ngannou's name is mentioned, maybe they can sort of get some heat off of it. But there's no way that him boxing again doesn't damper expectations on whether we'll ever see him in MMA again. If he succeeds against Joshua, then, what do you do for an encore? Come back to MMA and fight some unknown Russian guy? We were talking, the PFL supposedly is going to pay him, $10 million for a fight. And here they were able to maybe honor one of the fights on the contract with him boxing and making his $10 million. So he made his money. Now in MMA, Ngannou in the negotiations came out that he had asked the PFL for a nice payday, something like $2 million for his opponent as well. So that it would be, just at that, you're talking about a $12 million fight. And I don't see, the PFL might have that money, in their stash because they borrowed it from Qatar or from whatever hedge fund that they've got. But it's not like, they announced the fight, money is going to come pouring in and they'll pay the $12 million out of that. They're probably going to have to do a $12 million fight at a negative, at a loss at this point. So why not let him go ahead and honor his contract somewhere else? It sort of makes business sense, but again, it really takes the shine out of the Ngannou signing for the PFL. There's really they've done nothing. They've done nothing with it. Zero.
Yeah, and I think they were planning on maybe announcing something like in April for him to fight in PFL, but now it looks like that's that's in the wind.
Yeah, again, here's the thing. A few months ago, they announced that they were going to announce his opponent, that they had things figured out. And, we had gone through a list of opponents, Rico Verhoeven, the kickboxer, was one of the people on the list. And, he's been calling out Ngannou as well and things like that, So, but there really is no opponent for Ngannou besides John Jones in MMA. There's nobody who's very interesting. Pavlovic had some moments of heat in the UFC that, but at the end of the day, he's a Russian who doesn't speak English. It's not as monetizable a match. Maybe you do it in Russia and make big money over there. Okay, whatever you're going to do. But he's on the UFC roster. You have to wait for the UFC lawsuit to play out, change the landscape. That's years away from happening. They go to court in April. And then with appeals and things, it's years away from happening. Maybe that's what their game state is going to be. Letting God do what he wants until the courts change the landscape of MMA and the contracts and things. And then we've got a real shot at making one of the fights with John Jones or anyone like that. At least they're in the heavyweight division where they can let a few years go by and these guys still have shelf life. 40-year-old heavyweights in MMA are not unusual. In lighter divisions they are. It doesn't work out that way. The smaller you are, the shorter lifespan you seem to have. But again, when the PFL announced that they had signed Ngannou, they did it with a certain amount of bravado towards the UFC, where it's like, we got this done and nobody said we could do it. Now we've got the best guy and, we're starting our league and we're going to do PFL Africa and stuff like that. They set expectations that are just simply not being met with the bare minimum, So I think Ngannou is smart to move on. I think this also is actually an interesting hint here. Fury didn't look great in the Ngannou fight. That's the general consensus, And I present to you that a guy 6'9", not very athletic to begin with, when the wheels come off and he starts to get older and slower, he may say, okay, it's going to be more of a dangerous game against some of these big punchers and more athletic guys. The next time I go in, Fury was a rematch for Ngannou was probably the most monetary money Ngannou could make in my book. But if Top Rank is being purchased by the UFC now has their tentacles on Tyson Fury, so you move on. And Eddie Hearn and Matchroom with Joshua is a second generation owner of the company, and he's still young and spry enough that if he lasts till he's 80, we're going to be looking at him for 3 more decades, right? So he's still a relatively young man, and I'm sure that he may groom a third generation person. So Ngannou has escaped, has once again moved away from the UFC's tentacles by looking for another boxing match and landing it with Joshua, who at the end of the day is still one of the more marketable, boxers worldwide. The star certainly has come off his he's no longer the number one guy anymore, and he's taking losses and things. And certainly Andy Ruiz's career was made off of defeating him. But and Andy Ruiz was once a top ranked guy too, by the way. So there are tentacles everywhere, of what the UFC could do with Top Rank, if they get there. But this escapes that. So when they say March, they really, I don't see a feasible way that they can stop it from happening. The PFL could maybe with their contract with Ngannou, but it's not worth it for them because this lets Ngannou make his money without them having to pay it and not have a way to monetize and return the money in there. And that's what's I think is going on there. They simply they've got a $12 million match on the table that if they pay, they're going to lose $5 million on it. Who knows how much they're going to be able to make back with their limited distribution. And, Ngannou is still a B name for Tyson Fury, and I present to you that he'll still be the B side on the Joshua card. But being the B side at that level of boxing is more lucrative than anything in MMA, so Ngannou doesn't mind that. Ngannou's also kind of a private, quiet guy. I don't think he likes to be the center of attention that way, so I think the B side of boxing suits him, and suits the PFL to let him do it because I don't think that they can honor the contract that they signed him to, and make money.
you know, and if they're not front and center in this promotion of this Joshua fight, how bad does it make them look that they still have been unable to get him in the cage? Because unlike you, a lot of the fans don't know that this business end, that maybe it's in their best interest not to even have him fight at this point. But I mean, how bad did they look? UFC could use it against them to, you know, make fun of them or whatever. Dana White, I'm sure, could have a field day with that if he wanted.
Here's the thing. I said it at the beginning. The Ngannou signing for the PFL was a moment where they had everybody's attention, and they've lost everybody's attention.
Yep.
They were not able to keep momentum or anything. They've done nothing of on par with that to stay in the limelight. Or like I said, I've mentioned on this podcast several times how you had the tough season one end, and you had Bonner, and you had, and then the following week you had Couture, and then within a month I think you had Shamrock and Ortiz, and you had Couture rematching Liddell after Bonner and Forrest Griffin. And so the UFC was beginning to pick up their momentum, and they had things. You know what? You have to ask yourself, what happens if the PFL actually asserted themselves and said, "No, you know, the Joshua fight, yeah, I know he can make money, but we've already allowed him to make his money. We are going to execute what we've been stating, and that is we're going to ask him to honor his MMA side of his contract and do an MMA fight." And then they announce the fight, and they get an opponent, somebody who's limited on the radar, but maybe a challenge to him. I'm not saying that there's not a fighter out there that maybe could be a risk to him, but I'm saying that we don't know who that is yet because they haven't done the marketing like the UFC does on their end. So let's say the PFL had that fight and Ngannou got injured. They're not prepared for that. They're not prepared to say, all right, now we'll switch and boom, boom, we got Michael Venom Page here against that French kickboxer guy, and we'll make that the next fight. They just lost Michael Venom Page to the UFC already. You know, after inviting him to the show, they invited him to the show because Michael Venom didn't buy his ticket for Bellator at the box office and buy, you know, and walk in and, oh, you're here, let's use you on camera. That was a choreographed moment where they brought him in, and then proceeded to not sign him to a contract and let the UFC take him away. So where do you turn? You turn to Justino and what's the name of the girl wrestler? Kyla.
Kayla Harrison.
Yeah, yes. So you turn to that, which is also a relatively marketable fight. But again, you don't have the roster to say, okay, one of them got injured. Here, I'll slip in the other person, this, that, the other stuff. They haven't been able to pull the trigger. And what happens to me, what I think is happening here, what the PFL must be feeling is the fighters know that. So in other words, you know, Justino, you know, the UFC had a way of forcing their fight, you know, Forrest and Bonner, everybody looks at it as a historical fight, and it is, you know, and you have to realize that those guys did that for a pittance of money. The UFC already had the contract. They already had everything going forward. They already had Couture and Liddell signed for very little money also the following week and stuff like that. But they had all those guys marching to the beat because there was the semblance of progress. They're on TV. You know, so yeah, we're making not much more money than we made in, you know, Georgia war memorials, you know, for Forrest, and Bonner and Chicago war memorials, you know. They're not making a ton more money yet, but the potential is there, and you're on TV, you're famous now. You're starting to get UFC was starting to get on the radar in so many different places that I think people said, okay, I'm in with this, and the money will come. You know, and eventually, you know, I think Forrest was an employee for the UFC for a long time. Even Bonner was, until maybe some of his personal problems caught up to him. You know, rest in peace, you know, Stefan. But they all got little bites of money that were a lot more than they were ever going to get fighting on any other show but the UFC. So the UFC gave them that hope. I think that the PFL hasn't shown any sign of that type of hope, except for like, hey, join the be in the tournament. You might win $1 million. Not enough. Justino and Harrelson both should have been all in on this. They should have the fight should have been signed. They should have figured out a way to get it signed. They should have been all in on this, and we shouldn't be hearing about nothing else but that fight for the next couple of months. Ngannou and his opponent for the next few months. This is what should have been rolled out. Michael Venom Page against whoever on the roster. Do crossover Bellator. Do a Bellator versus PFL show roster if you're going to keep the Bellator brand alive in some way. You know, they have done precisely nothing. So, yeah, and now they've let their number one commodity, Ngannou, which they have not followed up on getting any heat. The signing happened more than half a year ago. And the PFL has made and generated 0 headlines with Ngannou. That's not me, crapping on the PFL. That's just facts.
Mm-hmm.
That's just facts. So, what does it look like to I don't think that the fans are moved by the PFL or the PFL name or anything like that. They have not captured anybody's imagination, and that includes the people in the business. That includes Venom Page signing with the UFC after going to a show where they pampered him, supposedly. And that includes Justino and Harrelson not committing in their interviews and saying, yeah, we'll see if it happens. They both want to do the fight. They both know that they'll make some money on it. And, in my eyes, both of them are, type A competitors. Harrelson is a top shelf athlete and competitor on the women's side, and Justino for years as well. I think that they would be moved by the challenge of fighting the best. You know what I mean? And you could, there should have been something done on some of these things. Again, even with the Bellator purchase, you knew about it half a year ago also. No? But it was officially announced just a month ago, right? And now a month has gone by, and what headlines have they generated? Precisely 0. Precisely 0. So, yeah, Ngannou is in the right place. Because at least they're not being aggressive with the you signed a contract. I don't know exactly the details of the contract. Maybe Ngannou had enough power that he can literally do what he wants. But when that signing occurred, in no circumstances were they like, well, he's going to go off on a run in boxing. It was he's going to fight Tyson Fury, make his money, and then come back to MMA. That was always what we heard.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's not happening. So the PFL is just a 0 factor. 0.
Yeah, it almost looks like Francis doesn't take them seriously either. He's like, I'll just sign another boxing match, and they can just twiddle their thumbs.
Francis was difficult to negotiate with for the UFC, probably because he has some demands that he was making. The amount of money was one of them, but also treatment and things like that. And, some of that was couched in the original press conferences by making him chairman of PFL Africa and stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. So, you're giving him some power within the organization and things like that. And any fighter is going to want, feel the buzz of that. But again, he must feel himself like there's nothing going on. There's nothing going on. I've got to move on and do something. I've got a limited shelf life. He might have 5 good years left or a few good years left. And, Eddie Hearn and Joshua in London, now you're talking about another, huge payday. And we'll see, The fight makes sense for Joshua because if Joshua is able to decidedly beat Ngannou, then he can make the case that, that he's better than Fury, that he did better than Fury against this X Factor type of an opponent, and that he was more suited to doing things like that. And, he's got longer shelf life. And like I said, with Fury, you may be looking at a guy who's athleticism is starting to wane, and he abuses his body. The bottom line is that that idea that he can go out and get fat and come back and get in shape and keep doing that for another decade or whatever. And Ngannou understands that's not the case. Ngannou takes care of himself in order to stay at this level, to get to the level he got there. And Fury learned a lesson in humility. We'll see how that plays out to him. Like I said, we haven't heard much from him. I hope he's not doing cocaine again.
But I mean, how bad does it look for promotion when the guy that you sign, the guy who is supposed to be kind of like the backbone of you taking another step as far as being something, anything close to the UFC, is now just going off and doing more boxing and not even fighting for you?
Just look at the difference. They should have handled Ngannou the way the UFC handled Conor McGregor, which is they allowed him to do the Mayweather thing. They put their name all over it, grabbed a ton of money for themselves out of it. But also, Conor's bite was big enough and strong enough that Conor's flirted with the idea of boxing and doing other things and things like that. But he's come back to the UFC. He's been back in the UFC ring. His next fight's going to be in the UFC again. They never let Conor and his brand stray far enough that it's just Conor. Conor is still a UFC fighter in everybody's mind across the world. And yeah, he hasn't fought in a while, so people criticize and this and that, the other thing. But again, if he fights in June or whenever it is, it will be in the UFC cage against another UFC fighter, and it will have their promotional machine behind it. The PFL doesn't even have experience with doing anything like that. All they've been able to say is announce tournaments and count on the heat of the tournament, the buildup of the tournament to make the finals compelling. You've got a couple of guys that, the $1 million, $1 million isn't what it used to be anyway. When me and you were kids and you were a millionaire and you had $1 million, you could almost maybe live the rest of your life. Now, a 30-year-old that wins $1 million, very few of them are going to invest and be wise enough to have that money, help them live the rest of their life. They're more likely going to need other incomes and things. So even the $1 million tournament, is not as glossy. Young people now view $1 million as a lot less than me and you did when we were kids. So even that $1 million tournament, I think the PFL gets limited heat for everything they do. It's like a bonfire with the UFC versus a match with the PFL. The PFL doesn't bring anything.
How could a show like that recover if they can't get Francis in the cage?
From
their image to the actual promotion itself, the promotion that's been running the shows, but also the image.
Yeah, no. Here's the problem: is you're calling it a recovery. A recovery implies that they were at a certain point,
right,
and would like to get back to that point. And only for the 3 days that they announced the Ngannou fight were they ever at a point where people were like, okay, let's see what these guys have. And at every single turn where they've had a chance to do something, they failed miserably. So there is no recovery. They've never gotten. There never was. That's what the PFL is. There never was. So they've run for maybe the last 5 years, and they've made a couple, Kayla Harrison, Mercier, a couple of guys and gals got to walk away with a couple $1 million. And for those athletes, more power to you, man. Great. Good, please, and take care of yourselves, You did what a lot of athletes have sacrificed in this business and never gotten to. But not even Kayla is a household name. They bought their household name in Ngannou, and then like I said, they've done absolutely nothing with him except for let him go to other organizations and be the B side for other people's A sides, and they haven't gotten any heat off of it themselves. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what goes on here in the future. But again, this stems from the fact that they said we're going to sign Ngannou because it will show the UFC. But that's they had no opponent. They had no plan. So they're signing, and then they're like, okay, wow, now what do we do? And I present to you that the fans, they're not going to sit around and wait to see what these guys are going to do. They've moved on. They've watched since the Ngannou signing of PFL. The PFL has done their tournaments and things where with limited distribution, and we've probably seen 40 UFC shows since then. Whatever that number is, 30, 40, it's not, 4 shows since the Ngannou signing a few months ago. The UFC is there, relentless with tons of stuff. They gave us Strickland and Adesanya. Now Strickland is a media guy, and O'Malley got the belt, one of the guys that they've been working on and bringing along and stuff like that. They're operating on different levels across the board. And the PFL has one level, slow.
Right. And I wanted to talk to you about, because I know you kind of brought this up when we were talking offline. For the people that put investment into this in Qatar, how does this affect them that Ngannou's not getting in the cage? Because, like you said, you had dealt with people that had invested money in Bodog. So, kind of talk about that a little bit.
I mean, nobody doesn't get tired of losing money. People are going to want their money back. And the idea of Qatar isn't, something it's set up as a fund that gives you money so that you can elevate your game. Those people are also going to want to see the accompanying elevation. I haven't seen any hint that the PFL is now a world level player. They've done these disjointed tournaments in the US and then in Europe, where the winners of the Europe tournaments made a fraction of the $1 million, 10% actually. So they've shown nothing. Like I said, I think at the end of the day, if Ngannou makes 10 million and the opponent makes 2 million, that's a $12 million fight. The PFL has never had a show that bought in $12 million so that they can say, okay, we can pay for the fight. But they'd have to make 15, pay for that fight, use $1 million for the show and $1 million maybe to pay the rest of the card, a pittance or whatever, but get the show done and then sock $1 million away as profit. They're not going to make $15 million on that fight. They have no way of making their money back. They don't have any big sponsors or anything like that. Qatar's not a sponsor. They may want a queue somewhere in the ring or anything like that, and they may want their name out there, but not like, like the UFC recently. It was controversial and this or the other thing. But guess what? Bud Light, after their fiasco in the what's the name of the trans guy that they had as a sponsor and stuff like that?
I forgot.
Yeah, but anyway, they really suffered as a company. So they saw signing with the UFC something, swinging the other direction towards masculinity or whatever, you want to call there. And they threw $100 million at them. What you have in Qatar is you have somebody asking for $100 million. Please give us this so that we can try to get to this level and stuff like that. There's nobody popping up to give them that kind of money. How much did Venom pay for the right to be their clothing sponsor? How much does everybody whose name appears on the ring or anything like that pay the UFC to do what they do? The UFC makes money. If the I recently saw a clip of Chael Sonnen, one of our favorites, right? But I recently saw Chael say that he made about $8 million or $4 million, something like that, a huge amount of money for his Anderson Silva fight. I assure you that writing that check out, or that, the cumulative effect of the money coming in that totals that, does not mean that the UFC didn't, was in the red for that show. Oh man, we didn't make money. We overpaid Chael. No. They paid that because they're making a lot more. Where are the PFL's income streams that they could 6 months ago promise to deliver the best heavyweight in the world, maybe, and pay him 10 million and do all that and say, beat their chest and say, yes, we're players. See, we're players. And they aren't. They haven't even played. They haven't played.
Now, what are the odds you think that PFL will have any visibility in Eddie Hearns' promotion of Joshua versus Ngannou?
I think it's 50-50. I think it's a no-brainer that they should. Like I said, but
Well, they didn't for the first fight, so do you think they're going to have any visibility
right, and
this time?
here's the problem. Not only did they not for the Tyson Fury fight, right? But when Matchroom and Eddie Hearn and Ngannou and the players, Joshua and everybody got together and they made this announcement this week, they weren't the presidents there either.
Nope.
It's not like they got it. It's not like they were like, all right, now, reset. We're going this direction. Don, fly out, stand next to Eddie Hearn, do what you got to do. Didn't happen. When Fury and Ngannou got together to announce their fight, and they went to Saudi Arabia for a big press conference. We've talked about it. Bob Arum, a Jew in Saudi Arabia. Times have changed in the world, right? But part of the reason that happened is because Bob wasn't going to have it any other way. Bob has a contract with Tyson Fury where he has control and could probably stop the whole goddamn thing if they don't treat him with respect and put his name and his company out there. The same thing for Queensberry and Tyson's other British manager. His name's gonna escape me for right now.
Frank Warren?
Yeah, exactly. Frank Warren. So now Frank Warren, Bob Arum, Tyson Fury, Ngannou, and Ngannou's longtime friend and business manager over there. What does it take for the PFL to click and say, send somebody, send Ray Cefo's, valet, somebody with a PFL shirt, please show me something, but zero. And again, at this press conference, Don Davis should have been, speaker number one saying, you know what, we're going to let this happen because we're friends of the fight game. But we are going to be with Ngannou, and we are still counting on him to be and do some type of presence. They could have spun it in such a way that they look good, at least for a presence. Like I said, just saying we're a friend of the fight game, and we want to see, Ngannou did so well with Fury. We do want to see him tested again in this respect, and we're going to wait and put our plans on hold so that Francis can do this because we are fans of the fight game. There's a clear message that they could have said to at least send a message. I wonder if Don Davis even knows the fight's going to happen. It's Don. Wake up. Hey, Don. Don, guess what? Ngannou's going to box again. What happened? Where are you? It's sad. It's really embarrassing. Because we watched the behavior of Dana and if money making is the goal, and I think Don Davis has less passion for the fight game than Dana does. Dana always wanted to make money, and he's shown he's good at it, and he's a killer. But there was also some passion for doing things his way in the fight game and things like that. Don Davis is just in an ivory tower, sitting there thinking, you could probably get another couple $100 million out of Qatar or Kuwait or wherever I need to go to get some money to keep this ball rolling, not reach into his money. He's not losing money. Don Davis is still going to have money. But his performance is just, tragic at this point. Dana, there's a reason why Dana, doesn't mention him really or anything like that. He mentions him every once in a while. It's because if he was really threatened by them, he'd never mention them, or every shot would be a real shot. After the PFL had their moment where we've talked about Michael Venom Page being at their show and stuff, what you didn't see is Dana turn around with a major press conference. We've signed Michael Venom Page, and we've got him here. They announced him, hey, mid-level card. In March, he's with us. Let's move on. Again, I'm not trying. I wanted to be. I'm like, that's why I love you, Todd, because You want the PFL to succeed.
Oh,
And
I
so
mean,
do I.
for me,
It would be fantastic if somebody were to rear their heads here and actually become a factor.
no,
But
well,
these guys
it's
are
not for
not
me. I'm
factors.
not choosing sides here. I'm just shocked that you've been able to bang this drum for this long and they haven't heard it, or you would think somebody would have told them, hey, have you guys ever thought about having some visibility at one of these events? Or, you know, I'm sure someone's told them they should be doing this.
Could you imagine if Mayweather had said to Dana, nah, we're not going to hook up with you? Then the fight just simply wouldn't have happened. They don't exert themselves. They're not showing, at the end of the day, Dana is a cutthroat businessman. You have to cut throats. You think Eddie Hearns not a cutthroat? These are murderers they're giving their guys up to. So if you don't show some guts in those rooms and stuff like that, they're going to run over you. Eddie Hearns got the fight he wanted because Joshua could have not. There's nobody Joshua could have fought, especially after Deontay Wilder's recent loss to Joseph Parker. The Wilder Anthony Joshua fight might have supplanted this and might have been what was on the radar. But as soon as Wilder fell back, you didn't see Eddie Hearn without a plan going, what do we do now? Boom. And the PFL still sitting there, Go to the PFL. We talked a month ago. Go to the PFL's website. Let's see if in the last month there's been any update, any calendar, anything. Nothing. I'm almost sure of it. I'm almost sure of it. What I can tell you is, even if it's there, it's not with the accompanied, 40 million hits of people checking it out and what the PFL is going to have going on and things like that. They may have 5,000 visitors a day on their site.
Here, I'll show it to you. I'm going to share my screen.
Let's see what they
got.
got.
I got to do this because it's going to be too funny.
If it's under construction with one of those little icons that comes up, that would be less surprising to me than if they actually have a calendar.
Hold on, I got to share my screen with you.
And remember this. Their last show in the States was in November. They have no show announced when they're returning. Nothing is out there. And the UFC is talking about McGregor in June. And every weekend between now and June is filled with a UFC card. They got 300 going on. They got, all kinds of other stuff. 2020, they're still honoring last year's champions.
All right. So can you see here? Here's the website.
Yeah.
And this is what we have so far. It's showing their world champions from their last.
Right. Now, I got news for you. Here, it's as simple as this. It's as simple as this. Read to me the headline. Scroll up top and read to the headline.
There's nothing.
Read. What's the title? PFL 2023 World Champions, right?
Yeah, champion results.
Todd, it's 2024.
Yeah.
They fell asleep and the year changed. And they now have last year's stuff.
Right. They got like the ESPN deal from last year.
Again, talking about, are we going to get Jake Paul and Nate Diaz, or was that talk?
Yeah.
All they do is talk. What about Frankie, the big butt guy?
And let's look at the schedule. Let's see if they have anything on their schedule.
And that's embarrassing. I mean, you got Ngannou there and Jake Paul, and that they think.
Yeah, there's not a single thing for 2024 on this. No. Nothing. See, it ends at 2023.
Yeah,
you can't scroll down any further.
That may actually be closer to the truth than you think.
And let's see Challenger Series. Let's see if they got anything for that. Nothing.
Hit Bellator MMA. Hit the in the other
Challenger Series. Let's see if we got something. I want to be fair here. See if they got something. Challenger Series 2023. Nothing.
Hold on. Read the small. We read the small language up top first. Hold on. 56 fighters compete January. What's this? Starting Friday, January 27th for 8 straight weeks, but it's January 27th, 2023. On Fubo Sports Network. You think the UFC and ESPN are sitting there like, concerned that this company's rising to take their spot?
At least they have something,
Right. At least it's not the construction site, with a little guy
No,
with a
this was
hammer.
January 27, 2023. So this is
Right.
last year.
Right. No, absolutely. That's
Yeah,
what I'm
never
pointing
mind. They
at.
don't have anything coming up
No, they
on
have
this.
nothing new.
Okay,
But
so
at
let's
least
see
it's not a.
PFL Europe. Let's see if they have something here.
Yeah, too late.
Nope.
Oh, look at this. Honoring 2023, the playoffs.
Nope.
They did playoffs December. There they go. $100,000. Click Bellator over in the corner because it says Bellator MMA
Right
now.
here.
If this takes you to the Bellator site, then and that's exactly what it friggin' does. Bellator on their website actually announces the purchase, and all the PFL could do is do a link back to the website of Bellator. Again, talk about redundancy. This site should have been shut down, and all this news should have been front page news on the other site. Bellator joins us. You go to Bellator.com, it should take you to the PFL site. And I'm a 50-year-old man. I'm not anybody's marketing genius. This is just no-brainer stuff. You know what I mean? It's just stuff that anybody would have done if they were really serious about, trying to change the sport. They talk a lot about changing things and how they've got this plan and stuff like that.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, this is bad. It's bad. This is why you get me ranting and raving and stuff. But these are nothing but facts. You know what I mean? These are nothing but facts. Their biggest star is going to do another sport again. Where, like we said, where was that in the plan that he was going to go off and do boxing? No, it was go do the Fury fight so he can make his money. The PFL shows their flexibility, how they're a little different than the UFC. The UFC, with their exclusive brand, would never let their athletes do this, with the one exception of McGregor. But you don't see anybody else going off to do stuff like that. Sometimes guys grapple or whatever, but it's not the same thing. The UFC has everybody tied down. The PFL was going to show us a different way of doing business by allowing him to do the Fury fight and then having him return to the MMA ring. And all of a sudden, Ngannou's now a boxer.
The other thing is, Ngannou doesn't seem like he's interested in bringing them along for the ride. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't visible for the Fury fight, and it didn't look like he had any kind of interest in saying, hey, this is the new promotion I signed with. They have to be a part of this. It didn't look like he made any effort to make that happen.
It wasn't his effort to make.
Right. But he could have tried.
We don't even know if he did.
Yeah.
What if he called up and said, I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia. Anybody coming? Can you send me a box of T-shirts? Something. But the non-reaction by the PFL, the non-activity there, that's what results in Kayla Harrison and Justino and Venom Page and everybody saying, show me, don't tell me. And me saying, show me, don't tell me. Tired of hearing about PFL Africa in 2027 and their World League and Jake Paul and this stuff is nonsense. It's complete and total nonsense. Compared to the fact is it's just inactivity at this point. It's now months with Ngannou signed. If you consider that we're already in December and this was Thanksgiving, or I'm sorry, in January, this is Thanksgiving, it's been more than a month since their season ended. What are they waiting for?
Yeah. Well, this is as good a time as any to talk about our gambling sponsor, BetStamp. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about that. And then we'll kind of finish up. I want to hear what Miguel thinks about what actually is going to happen in this fight. So I'm just going to read a little bit about BetStamp and our new bet sponsor here. So just a moment here. Sports betting has rapidly risen in popularity, and I want to connect you all with an opportunity to get started or get ahead. Having multiple sportsbook accounts is the most simple way to maximize your profits, and there's never been a better time to sign up. When you visit my page, signupexpert.com/TAS, you'll be connected with all sportsbooks in your region, along with a review of each platform and its unique benefits. All these sportsbooks have valuable sign-up offers for new users. And when you register through my link, you will automatically receive the top offer at each one. When you use multiple sports books, you ensure that you can always access the best available betting odds, which is key to successful sports betting. If you want to take advantage of these bets and support our brand, please consider signing up for your next sportsbook at signupexpert.com/TAS. And all.
And this fight's a great opportunity to actually highlight what BetStamp does, which is kind of a wrap up of multiple sports books. So what would I be doing? I'd be looking at every sports book I have. I want to see who's going to be the first one to put odds on Joshua and Ngannou and where the odds come in. Joshua will probably be favored, but how wide is he going to be a favorite? As Ngannou closed the gap, because Fury was, a four-figure favorite. That's not going to be the case in this fight. So can you find, the first guy publishes the odds. Maybe they make a mistake, and maybe you do grab Joshua at or Ngannou as a plus plus 1,000 favorite underdog rather. And then all of a sudden people realize, and then the other books start publishing, and the line starts to come down and get a lot closer. But you've still got that bet lined up from the very first moment. So this is a great highlight for what BetStamp does, and a great highlight for why multiple sports books is the way that real gamblers do it, because I want to see what this line is going to be. I checked a couple of the sites that I go to see where the odds are, and I haven't found odds yet for Joshua and Ngannou, but I present to you that the moment they come out is a good opportunity to gauge and see how this fight's going to go. In the ring, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting because Joshua's younger and a much better athlete than Fury, but he's a lot less complicated as a boxer. He was always very fundamental, but, to use a term I've heard boxing people say, he was very vanilla. He doesn't present a lot of complications to his opponents. It's just overcome his physicality. And in Ngannou, he's got a physical match, if not a superior athlete. If Ngannou's 260, I don't think Joshua is quite 260. So he may be facing a bigger, stronger man. And again, with if Fury couldn't fool him, and we've seen Fury be very sophisticated with his boxing, then I think Joshua presents a better opportunity for Ngannou to notch that win. And, should he win, then, you may never see him in MMA again. Even if he loses, you may never see him in MMA again.
Right, just given the paydays of the two fights.
Yeah. And here's the other thing is, and we've talked about this in many different dimensions, including, which is a completely different conversation, but in, why we haven't seen Conor in the way that satisfies the fans as often as we want or whatever. Once you've made a certain amount of money for something, any job that you do, Todd, whatever, I work at 7-Eleven, I make $20 an hour. The next year I make $21 an hour. The next year I make $22 an hour. Money's going up a little bit. People are satisfied with getting a 3-4% raise a year. But what if that was actually turned around and your 7-Eleven job was like, well, you made $22 an hour, but now you're going to make $14 an hour. You'd have a whole bunch of unhappy people. A lot of people wouldn't even put up, so the pay cut really affects it, especially in something where the fighters have an emotional tie. They have to be psyched up for the fight. They have to have everything right. Fighters can be affected by, my mom was sick, I was cheating on my girlfriend, this, that, the other stuff. They got to be laser focused. And if the thing is why am I doing this? Why would I do it like I did for 30 million when I am now getting 8 million? And it seems ridiculous because why not sock away another 8 million for the common person? But you're talking about just basic human motivations. Why would you operate for a pay cut? So Ngannou he's going to box again against Joshua. And if it happens in London, he's going to monetize maybe even better than he did for the Fury fight. Eddie Hearn is, a shark, like I said, a killer businessman. Dana doesn't have anything on Eddie Hearn. They're just operating different sports and stuff like that, but they are the elite businessmen of their sport. Bob Arum too, but Bob Arum's 80 something. Eddie still has some spunk, and I present to you that Joshua, when he was undefeated and was commonly being compared to Muhammad Ali, I never really bought that, because I see a vanilla boxer. I see a guy who's fundamentally pretty sound and a very good athlete, and he hits hard, but he was not the in-ring showman that Muhammad Ali was. That's a comparison that's very unfair to Joshua. But he was undefeated, and he's a good-looking guy, and there were some comparisons with charisma and things like that. Not even the charisma. He doesn't have the charisma that Muhammad Ali had. This was not a fair comparison. But Eddie Hearn was making it because he was selling what he had, because that's what he does. And here, he's made him, like I said, the Deontay Wilder fight fell apart on Christmas when he lost to Joseph Parker. We are now less than 3 weeks since that, and he's already shown us what his plan B was. His plan B is not, well, we're going to go back and fight Dillian White again or something B-class. It was another A-class name, an A-class show that everybody in the world is going to be watching with Anthony Joshua. So though Joshua is no longer the undefeated boxer and the world beater that he claimed him to be from the beginning, Eddie Hearn has done everything he needs to do to keep his guy at the top of the game. So my hat's off to him as a businessman. And Ngannou, hey, Ngannou's just going to grab his money. And again, Ngannou, I present to you, it's the PFL that has to move here. Ngannou has to remind them to send him a box of T-shirts. Then he's losing already, and that's I think he's already realized that the chances of PFL Africa in 2027 are very slim.
Yeah, let me ask you this: why do you think Eddie Hearn had Ngannou as a backup plan? Do you think that was always his backup plan, or do you think he put this together in a few weeks?
No, I think it probably came together in a few weeks. I think, but I don't think you need more than a few weeks to do it. I think Wilder was always the A plan that's been talked about for years. I think Wilder, with his limitations and stuff, and Joshua is a compelling fight that if Joshua wins, the case could be made for the Tyson Fury fights or the Usyk fights, and he's right back in the world title picture, And if you were to win the world championship against one of those guys in the next couple of years and hold on to it for a few years, that's a lot of cleaning up of the legacy that he'd be doing. So I think his plan is that I think he's got his eggs in the Joshua market basket rather. He signed him since the Olympics, so he saw something. That's his guy, and they're together. And interestingly, you had Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo Alvarez with a very similar relationship, where you had Oscar and, monetizing Canelo, making Canelo a worldwide superstar. And they're no longer together, really. Oscar may still grab a bite because of contracts and stuff, but they don't do press conferences anymore and stuff. But Eddie Hearn has that magic where he's still by Joshua's side. Maybe it's because of contracts and Joshua can't get rid of him. But I present to you that he brings a lot to the table. So yeah, when I'm sure that when Parker's hand was raised, that Eddie Hearn and Anthony Joshua were on the phone together. It's like, what are we gonna do? And Eddie Hearn had an answer right away, and that's what Dana would have done. Dana would have had something ready to announce, not sit for months, not knowing what you're doing. And Ngannou is also not sitting around for months, not knowing what he's doing. He's not waiting for the PFL to come up with the plan. He's off doing what he needs to do to make sure that he ends his career, monetizing and making the money that he's, basically qualified and eligible to make. So yeah, I think that this came together kind of fast. I think that there's a logic to the fight as well. So a lot of the, we know when he made for Tyson Fury around. So Eddie Hearn couldn't come in and say, like, all right, will you take $3 million? Eddie's having to pay Ngannou more than any opponent he's ever paid Joshua to fight Anthony Joshua. Anyone. Even the Andy Ruiz rematch. You know, Ngannou's going to make much more money than anybody who's ever fought Anthony Joshua. But Eddie Hearn was prepared to do that because you need something of high recognition. And the payoff is if Joshua can wipe out Ngannou, knock him out in 3, then his case is made as Fury's heading down and I'm still trajectorying up, and see if you can make that major fight at some point in England. You know, we'll see how Usyk plays into this. Usyk's already, shown himself against Joshua. I'm not sure they want much more of that, but I think Fury is very targetable at this point. Like I said, you've got in England, you've got the example of David Price. When big men start to lose, get into their later years and their athleticism starts to, and Fury wasn't blessed with major athleticism from the very beginning. He had great footwork and things, but a lot of that's practice. He's not a great athlete. And if he's going to slow down just a pinch and be a little bit slower and stuff like that, he's going to look more and more beatable. David Price had the problem too that, when he got hit, he got knocked out. And Fury's been able to get up. So he's made it a little bit compelling and things like that. He's gone on to win the matches at the end of the day, one way or another. So Joshua, I think, is still targeting fighting Fury in Wembley or one of the major stadiums as the super big money fight that they have there. At the end of the day, even if people think Ngannou won, Fury is still the undefeated, boxer. So Joshua is targeting Fury with this match. That's I think Eddie Hearn's thinking is if we can do a good showing, take this guy out, send this guy back to MMA the way Fury should have, the way a fighter who was minus 1,500 or whatever he was at the sport books should have done. If we can do that, then that changes the whole chemistry of what's going on there at the top of boxing.
I think that's a great way to end that, but I want to put one thing, just a yes or no. Gun to your head. Doesn't Ngannou ever fight in PFL?
No.
I think that's a great way to leave, cliffhanger to leave for everybody. No, he's not going to fight in PFL again. Now, and as we always do at the end of the episodes, I want to give you a chance to talk about the dog rescue that you're working for and that we do ask people contribute to.
Yeah, today we're recording in the evening. I probably bathed 15 dogs today. Just went to the shelter and, grabbed and got the hose. Beautiful day here in Costa Rica. It was 80 degrees and the sun was out and stuff. And, scrubbing dogs. I didn't get bit, which is always cool. A lot of dogs kind of liked the bath. Some didn't. Mine didn't because the first thing he did when we got home, he was still a little wet. He ran out and rolled around in dirt immediately. So, yeah, it's just a passion thing for me. The dogs need the help. I'm there to help. MMA no longer needs my help, I guess, except for maybe the few fans here. And I present to you that Don Davis does need my help.
Yeah.
But he's not asking for it. So I'm not soliciting anything. I'm doing what I want. If anybody can help with a little bit of money for Ashley's Wet Nose Project at the GoFundMe page, it all goes to a good cause. The last time we talked, we went out and there was a dog with a broken leg in the neighborhood, and I'm crushed to say we couldn't find him. So I don't know if somebody else took him in and helped him, or if he walked off into the forest and is trying to get by out there. And that's the ups and downs of it. That they're with every good story. We got the horse over there. I saw him trotting around in his area now, and they bring him big piles of grass, and he's getting chubbier and stuff like that. But for every good story, there are bad stories too. So that's why I dedicate my energy to that, to try to get as many of the bad stories eliminated as possible. So thanks to anybody, at least even just listening, this far in the podcast, even if you're not able to contribute, if you're able to share and maybe help a dog in your area, go to your shelters and walk some of the dogs, take them out, ask to see if there's a euthanasia list at the shelters. You'd be surprised how many no-kill shelters actually have to perform euthanasia just because of the amount of dogs that are being piled into shelters. And I'm talking about in the United States. And on a worldwide level, the situation for animals is bleak. So anything I can do to help, their help is much better received than helping humans. So that's how I feel about it.
And you can find the link in the show notes, and you could also share it if you want to. You could share it to other people or share it social media and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And,
it'd be great. The two pit bulls I started out with Ashley was, I was watching these two pit bulls that she has to actually rent a house to keep them separate from the rest of the shelter because they are not good around other dogs and stuff. And there's a fellow from Germany who's been living there for 2 months. They're practically his dogs now. And, I see him walking around town with them, and, they're actually, able to walk by other dogs and not act aggressively and stuff like that. So there's been progress made, and it's slow. It's months of change. When an animal is betrayed in some way, they feel it. And getting them back to trusting people and trusting things is not easy. So there's a lot of work being done on a lot of different levels. And like I said, Ashley has to pay for that house and the food for 70 dogs and things on a monthly basis, as well as veterinarians and volunteers that if you're a volunteer, it doesn't mean that we don't have to buy them sandwiches when they're out doing the work and stuff like that. So it's unbelievable how fast money goes, and you can see why the dogs come in last. People are not going to spend money unless there's some passion in there, and that's why it's great. Like I said, if you don't have the money, go to a shelter and just give them some time, give them some love, and you'll be rewarded for it.
Well, as always, Miguel, I think it's great to have your insight, and it's PFL. If you're watching this, Miguel could probably help save your promotion, perhaps, or at least help guide you in a more positive direction, perhaps.
Yeah, at least go down fighting, because this is embarrassing. You know what I mean? It's like it's if what you need is a voice, somebody who's going to give you a direction, and your stated goal is to be a world level company and stuff like that, back it up in some way. Even if you fall flat on your face, you haven't even made an effort. Is what we're seeing, what the public is seeing, and that's the murder of it. Me and you as insiders, okay, we could take the good with the bad and judge this, out of the other stuff, but again, with the public, when you say PFL now, who's really moved on Main Street in America?
Yeah,
so there you have it. At least you can go down fighting.
Right. All right, Miguel. Well, as always, and everyone who watched the episode, we appreciate it, and please subscribe to the channel and share stuff out if you want. And we always appreciate your support. And until next time, take care.